Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tefty, and today we're looking at the Digitakt from Electron and the Akai MPC One. Both of them are beat-making platforms, and I want to pose the question, Digitakt or MPC One? Let's get into it. I will say right off the bat that both platforms are great, and they both have their strengths and their weaknesses. I will not be reviewing these boxes super in-depth either, because that would be an insanely long video. In full disclosure, I am pretty new to the MPC platform. The MPC One is my first MPC, so that gives you a time frame on that. I have owned the Digitakt since 2018, and last year, Meems and I released 2 albums that were basically written, arranged, produced on the Digitakt, and then recorded into Ableton as live jams type of setup, or a live setup, and then mixed and finished in Ableton. And obviously we've done a bunch of jams with the Digitakt and the MPC One on this channel, as you guys can see if you go back through our videos. And with that being said, the MPC One definitely has been used more as a Digitakt replacement when I have been doing those jams. The similarities, how you can set up sequences and trigger specific instruments and also send MIDI data out and all that. So I have used them in similar fashions, which I think is the reason for this video. Also, I have not done an official release with the MPC One yet. I haven't actually finished something. I have used the song mode before, which the Digitakt does not have, and just want to give you guys full disclosure where I'm at, where my viewpoint is. So let's start with the obvious stuff. First, they are both capable beat-making machines. Obviously. Both are sample-based and both run for about $700 street price. The Digitakt is a bit more expensive at around $750 street price. Both have stereo outs and stereo inputs for sampling. Both have MIDI I/O, and both can be plugged in via USB to the PC for some extra communications. The MPC One goes a bit further with an additional USB jack that is technically an in-port as opposed to an out-port for USB, and that does expand its connectivity for MIDI USB connections greatly. And you can also hook up a hub and also hook up an SSD drive and that type of thing to be plugged into there. The Digitakt does not have an SD card port. The MPC One does, and I have a 64 gig chip put into mine at all times. That's usually where I save my project data and all that. In update 2.8 for MPC One, they expanded those MIDI capabilities drastically. It now recognizes generic USB MIDI drivers. So if I plug in the Pro 3 or the Summit, it will say, oh, this is the DSi Pro 3 in here, and it'll give me the proper ports and all that. You can hook up with a USB hub, so that makes it extremely attractive for being able to easily plug in your MIDI I/O gear. So that's very nice, and that happened with MPC 2.8. But I do want to point out that's software version 2.8, and we're now getting that feature, because in my mind I feel like that's the feature that should have come with it right off the bat. But here we are, MPC 2.8, and now it's obviously on the firmware of the other devices, but those devices are now getting that ability. Seems like something that should have been worked out to begin with. So both of these devices do have PC connectivity, as I said before. The Digitakt has Overbridge, which is really nice, we'll get into that. And the MPC One can be operated as a standalone controller for the software. Generally speaking, I don't use these devices for their PC integration. I treat them as beat boxes or producing boxes, sound generation tools. It's like an instrument that I pull off the wall, like a guitar or something like that. I'm expecting to get certain workflows that inspire creativity in the moment when I'm using these devices. So typically, the PC side of stuff is a bonus. It's not a must-have. Again, I think the draw to hardware devices is the creativity that it can inspire with getting your hands on it directly, making it feel more like an actual instrument. And later on in the video, I will be covering more PC-specific details. So while there's definitely crossover between these two devices, once you get past the beat-making similarities, the MPC One platform completely dwarfs the Digitakt, and that is just something we need to get out in the open right now. It's very obvious this is a full-on DAW platform, and it shows. The complexity is there, the options are there, the menu diving is there. So with the Digitakt, at any given time, you have 8 voices. Channels 1 through 8 are sampled voices. Can sample stereo sources, but they will get summed down to mono once you put them into here. So again, at any given time, you can have 8 voices being triggered with sample data. That does not mean that you can only have 1 sample per track, because these are technically tracks. You can actually have each one of these tracks play a different sample per trigger. And you can load up, I believe, 128 total samples in your pool per project type of thing that you can reference. And each one of those samples can then get manipulated per step in the sequencer. And that's one of the great things about Digitakt in the Electron way. But again, no stereo samples. And I know for some people that can be a huge bummer. If you have a large library of vinyl and you want to get that stereo image, then you're not going to be able to do that with the Digitakt. Unless you want to use 2 channels. And if you're using 2 channels just for one sample, then suddenly you're cutting down 25% of your options here. Like, I don't think you should use it that way. Now, if you treat the voices strictly as drum samples or monophonic sources, then it actually works out really nice. And if you accept that limitation in it, it becomes very creative. It's honestly not as big of a deal for me personally. Now, in comparison to the MPC One sampling capabilities, there really is no contest. I mean, you have the option to have just an insane number of samples loaded at any given time. And it comes down to its CPU usage right here. You have CPU, memory, and drive space, which drive space, I don't think you're ever gonna really have an issue if you swap SD cards. But you're gonna load up samples into memory, and the CPU is going to keep a tally of that stuff. You have to load a lot of samples to max this thing out. And on top of that, you have audio tracks as well. It is limited, I believe it's only 8 audio tracks. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments on that one. So you can have 8 audio tracks and then a whole crap load of samples loaded. And each one of these programs can have 128, I believe, because it's 16, 16. Yeah, I think it's 128 total samples loaded, because each one of these can be technically, so you have 8 banks of 16 pads essentially on here that per program you could load. I don't see a reason for anybody to load all 128 of those pads. Then the nice thing is when you sample into here, you can actually have an auto chop, and it will just spread those out across all the pads. So you can then go in and select stuff if you want to be lazy about it and not actually chop specific things. That's a nice feature on there. The flexibility on that is just enormous. Like, you have so much space to work with, and each one of these pads can actually have, like, if you go program edit and I'm on A09 right here, I can then go to effects and I can have 4 individual effects per pad on here. That's really awesome. And then obviously you have stuff where you can stretch a sample across all the pads or play it off of a keyboard or something like that. In terms of sampling capability, the MPC One is obviously king on this, and you also have a looper as well. You go here and you can actually loop stuff or capture stuff as a loop into the memory bank. I actually like using this feature quite a bit. Memes will like come up with an idea or like a hook or something that she wants to grab real quick, and you can just load up the looper, grab that line, and then save it, and then attach it to a pad that you can just trigger, and then you have that idea saved. You don't have to trigger that idea all the time, but at least you have it saved, and then continue doing that looping type of stuff. And then it also keeps it in sync with your project timeline and all that. So that's one of the things I really like about that. And also you can just straight up sample too. You can just let it go for, I mean, this is set up for 15 minutes. I wouldn't technically sample for 15 minutes, but it's in case I need to. In terms of sampling capabilities, clearly the MPC One is king on that. Like, your actual flexibility is massive. But if you want speed and snappiness and just you're quick to the punches, I gotta say the Digitakt does it really well, because all you do is you hit direct right here, and then it's already monitoring whatever inputs you have. You can just hit function yes to start recording. Then it's gonna start recording whatever's coming in on the jack. And once you're done, you just hit yes to stop, and it's gonna normalize, and that's just a bunch of noise right there. But you now can go ahead and start chopping that into the individual pads. In terms of grabbing something really quick, I think the Digitakt excels at this. In fact, across the board throughout this, if you want speed, Digitakt is technically going to be the king on this, because it's streamlined. It's thrown away extra features, so you're only thinking about what you have, and giving you a streamlined Electron way beat production process. Whereas the MPC One is approaching it as a full-on DAW. You have a crap load of options, tons of effects. Digitakt, very limited on effects. And again, that's a pro and a con, because a pro in that you are only thinking of your limited pool of effects, so you're not overthinking what you could do. But it's a con in that you're not going to be able to apply chorus to every voice or whatever, and we'll get to that more. Whereas the MPC One, it's like you can spend hours on messing with sounds and ultimately not getting anywhere in your production because you have so many options. You really have to discipline yourself when you're doing production. You have so many tools available to you. You have to say, okay, I'm only going to do this type of stuff with this device right now. If you've been producing for a while, you know what I'm talking about. MPC One is basically a full-on DAW, so the sampling capabilities is just insane. You got all the effects from compression, EQ, filtering, all that stuff, and it can be per pad or per channel. You have per program, you can have up to 4 effects. There's send effects as well. And then there's also effects that you can put on the actual master output of the MPC One. And all that comes at the cost of complexity. Because even as I'm saying, like, the effect sends, I've been using this device for a few months, and I don't think I've yet used the effect sends on the MPC One because I don't know where they're at. And I'll admit that's weird to say in a video where I'm comparing 2 devices, but I kind of want to show you guys how this has so much complexity to it out of the box that you can just focus on one area and not actually see other sides of it for a long time. And I think that's, again, one of those things where you have to weigh those pros and cons for yourself. How much complexity do you want versus how much sheer creativity do you want that gets you going right away so you're not thinking about that stuff? And I'm a big proponent of taking the creative side of things and separating it from the finishing side of things, like the editing and finalizing. I think when you're in creativity mode, it's really good to be inspired. It's great to be just not thinking about technicalities and all that. And then when you're in finishing mode, that's when you want to really dig into the technical side of stuff. So yeah, when it comes to Digitakt, I will say, and I'll state this again, the effects, while they're serviceable, they're good, they are very limited. And it's definitely one of my gripes about this box, because you have delay and reverb. And again, they're a global send. So all 8 tracks, 1 through 8, send audio to those effects, and then they get mixed into the master bus that gets output on here. So you can't have separate delays on each one of these. They all share the same delay. So if you go function delay, you get to see what this delay is, and it's a good delay. Again, the reverb and the delay on this box, they sound good. But once again, that is limiting because that's it. That's on this. In fact, the Digitone has a chorus, and I really like the sound of that chorus. I wish they would put it into this box. It'd be nice if they could expand this box, but I don't know what type of CPU is in this thing. I know there's a multi-core CPU in the MPC One they talk about on the website. It's part of the Electron ethos, where they want to streamline a sampled type of setup for you. And maybe they're thinking that you should bake chorus into your samples as you put it into the box. That's totally possible, you know? I don't think there's a right or wrong for that type of stuff. It's more of a preference. Also, there is overdrive per channel, so you do have overdrive, which is nice. So you got your delays, your sends, you can pan and all that, and you can adjust overall volume level for the individual tracks. There's an LFO per channel, which is nice. So you can modulate things like the sample stuff on here is really cool. You can adjust sample start, length, tune, all that stuff. Pretty straightforward for sample type of stuff. You can also reduce the bit rate. And again, LFO can control all that stuff. LFO can also control the filters and things like that. The filter actually is another one of those points where I think it gets knocked down a couple points because it's pretty limited. And again, if you look at the Digitone has a fundamental filter where you can shave off the bottom and the top, and then you can actually apply a legit filter with multiple options on there. Digitakt, unfortunately, is really limited, and maybe they could update that in the future. Don't know. It'd be great if they could, but you have a low pass, you have a high pass, and you have off. So low pass, high pass, off. And it sounds okay. It's nothing to write home about. It's a decent filter. And obviously it's got an envelope attached to it, so you can do some shaping. So it gets the job done, but it's nothing wild, nothing crazy. And again, the Digitone has better shaping and controls on that. I really do wish that they would have put a fundamental filter on there, because a lot of times I'll want to shave off some bottom end and the top end and have like the resonance peak on the top, but just filter out some of the low end. You can't do that on the Digitakt. Again, in comparison to MPC One, tons of effects, all that stuff, like every pad or every sample channel has a built-in, I'll show you right here. We'll go program edit, filter envelope right here. So you have automatic filter stuff built in, and you have just tons of options and like different modeling and all that. Like I said, this is more of a full-on DAW, so you have to keep that in mind between these two devices. By this time, I know that this video is sounding like, well, clearly the MPC One has got all the bells and whistles, right? And it does have all the bells and whistles, but the workflow, I haven't quite gotten to the workflow yet, and we'll talk about that. And that's really where the difference comes into play. The speed of execution of making some of these beats. So anyways, the takeaway on this is obviously the Digitakt is going to be limited, but it's a streamlined platform for your process. And I think it's time to talk about that streamlined process. So what does the Electron Wave mean? It's the sequencer. What makes the Electron gear special beyond its sound is the way the sequencer is set up. If you go to, say, track 1, which I believe is kick right now. In fact, I've got to put my headphones on. So if you go to track 1, you can, if you hit the record button, you can see I have 2 triggers right here. And the next one, I got 2 triggers the same, 2 triggers right here. Let's mute everything else. I believe this was the jam that we did for On the Spot recently. Play this back so you see this stuff. Right there. Pretty straightforward, right? It's a sequencer. Yeah, you got some triggers on there, right? Straightforward stuff. Where it gets really interesting is you can affect all the settings on the box per trigger. So I can hold down 5. I'm putting a trigger in here. If you hear this. Now, let's say I want to jack up the tune on this. So it's affecting that sound right there. That's a super basic example right there. But let's say we adjust the bit rate so it gets crushed a bit. And then also we're going to switch the filter to high pass. Make it pop, I guess, right here. Let's bring down the volume. I'm also going to give it some reverb and delay. Now let's hear that. So on just one track, I'm already shaping some interesting sounds. Now let's say I want to randomly trigger that sound. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that. I'm going to hit, it says copy underneath here. So I'm going to hit copy and it says copy 1 trig. So now if I hold these 4 down right here and I go paste, they all should be on that. Oh, actually, it didn't do that. It only did this one, or it only did 9. So let's paste these. So my bad. It only copies that trigger information one time when you paste it. So now, all right. So that's obviously too much, right? Now let's go to the trigger, and we're going to do condition. Conditions allow it to be under certain conditions. It makes sense, right? You can have it be the first time in a measure, or the first time it comes around, it does that. My favorites are the percentages. So here, 33% of the time, oh, you know what? You can't see it on here. I apologize. I'll just speak it out. So 33% of the time, it will trigger these 4 right here. And let's double check this. 33, 33, 33, 33. So now, cool, right? So I'm gonna make it so it's only one measure right now. So you guys can see it going across right here. And I'm also going to copy this again. I'm gonna start pasting it everywhere. Okay, so this is 33 again, yeah. So I'm gonna grab these 4 right here. I'm gonna lower this chance even further. Like we're gonna go 13%, and same thing with these. Or no, these will be like 6% of the time it's gonna trigger those. And this, or these over here, lower it. So now let's listen to that. Keep in mind, that was only one measure. You have up to 4 measures on here. I'm not sure if it's obvious what type of power is available in that, but I just created a 1-bar sequence that had generative capabilities. I made it so it always has that bump in the middle, or in the beginning, that I literally just took the same sample and pitched it up. I could grab a different sample and they could be in there. I played like 4 or 8 bars or something like that, and it had this variation and change that was going on. And to me, when I hear stuff like that, I'm immediately inspired because I feel like the machine is talking to me or giving me feedback in ways that I wouldn't necessarily expect. One of the coolest things about the Electron way is that you can, every one of the Electron boxes is set up this way. And so once you learn how to do that with this stuff, you're good to go. You know how to do it. So you do need to keep in mind that there is a 4-bar total limit when it comes to this stuff. And per track can have a total of 4 bars based on the subdivision that you've chosen. And that's typically going to be a 16th note. So if you're at 105 BPM, 4 bars, you can have, each one of these is going to be a 16th note. You can change that though, if you go into the options here. This was an update that showed up sometime mid-2019. This for me was actually a game changer because a lot of the times I like to program a pad on the MIDI channels. We'll get to the MIDI channels soon. I'll have those chord changes on the downbeat for the pads. And a lot of the times I wanted to do it more than just 4 bars. So what I had to do is go into conditional triggers and say on the first round, do this chord, on the second round, do this chord. And while that was a hack and it did work, it was kind of a pain in the ass. Now what you can do with the update that they did in 2019 is change the bass time for these to be eighth notes, quarter notes, whatever you want, or even like 30-second notes if you want to cut it even quicker. That at least affords you the capability of having, say, 8 bars, 12 bars, 16 bar chord progressions happen with this format and setup. Now I know, in contrast to the MPC One, it's kind of crazy to think that you're limited in that kind of way, because the MPC, you can have whatever length of whatever sequencer lengths and all that, and it's not going to throw you any kind of problems whatsoever. So yeah, I can change that kick drum to be able to have 4 pages right there. If you make a generative piece out of 1 bar, imagine what you could do with 4 bars, right? It does take more time to program, but it's not that difficult to actually get that going. You can also live program stuff as well, or live change stuff. So let me mute this stuff again. I'm gonna live record the overdrive. For 1 bar, the overdrive is getting increased like that. With Digitakt, it tells you if you have yellow highlights right here, that means that there is essentially automation information. Now, the automation is not highly detailed, it is per track, so you're not going to get really nice sweeps and all that. In contrast to MPC One, you're going to be able to draw in specific automation curves and all that. So all in all, the sequencer, in my opinion, is superior to the MPC One. There's more flexibility with the MPC One, and you, like I said, you can do automation curves, and you don't have any kind of limits whatsoever of bars and all that. But when it comes to sheer creativity and speed, I feel like the sequencer really wins on this. Another reason why I say that about the Digitakt is the way it's set up is you have the 8 channels up top. You also have 8 channels of MIDI below as well. So you can have each one of the bottom tracks right here be a MIDI channel that gets sent out, and you can program your MIDI gear that way. And it's really handy, it's nice. So, and it's super quick. Again, I just go here. So I can change the channel. I can say, whoops, we'll say channel 1 or a 6 or whatever. You can change banks on there. Another quick way of working is I can just go into record mode. I can hold the trigger, and then I can play a chord, and it will know that chord goes to that trigger. There is a limit of polyphony when it comes to the Digitakt. And again, this is another strange limitation if you're comparing apples to oranges here. But in practice and in reality, and from producing 2 records so far, I did not have an issue with it at all. If an instrument needed more voices, I could always just throw it onto another track if it needed it, because I did not use all 8 tracks every time. Usually it was a bass, pad, lead, maybe alternate pad, or like some sort of weird sprinkle type of thing. And then if I needed to throw another MIDI track in there, then I would. And usually if I found myself needing more than 4 notes, I'd actually reconsider the arrangement. Be like, do I really need to put more notes in this? Or should something else support it that way? And that was actually an interesting way of approaching some of the producing. So the four note polyphony, while it's strange, it didn't actually affect me that much. And again, it's really cool just being able to go in, grab the trigger, play the chord, got it, and then you can go in and actually like affect it. The same trigger condition type of stuff can happen on the MIDI channels as well. So that is super cool. And they also get LFOs associated with them. So you can LFO MIDI CC values and all that. I didn't do that too often, personally, but you can, which is really nice. Another caveat, though, is that aftertouch and modulation was not translated when you play through the Digitakt to other devices. And that could also be a big deal breaker for some people. I do realize that, and I want you guys to fully be aware that you're not going to be able to save that information. You can fake it and going into the CCs and then record automation information per track. Again, it's not going to be smooth curves, it's going to be stepped information. So if you were thinking, oh man, I could just record all my automation data into that MIDI track, not going to happen. Yeah, unfortunately not. It didn't affect me too much though, because most of the time I was actually live automating things when we're recording. So again, it's one of those things where it kind of makes you choose on how much you're going to be affecting it. And there was definitely a few times where I set up like CC information to be able to adjust filters directly on the Digitakt as it was being played, so I could do some other stuff or switch back and forth. So it gives you some great live options right there, but it's not going to, again, it's not going to replace your DAW. Just straight up, that's not going to happen. And in my opinion, the Electron sequencer is extremely powerful and a definite pro. In fact, I believe it's the only thing that the MPC One does not have technically. That is probabilistic triggers. I'm pretty sure the MPC One cannot do what I did with that 1 bar measure right there. I know there's like workarounds that you can potentially do to get it to simulate that type of stuff, but it's not going to be true probabilistic type of stuff that you can do on the Digitakt. And also the speed at which you can do it on the Digitakt. It's just insanely fast. You're just like, boom, 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 done. Oh yeah, you can also do retriggers too. I didn't show you guys that, but if you want to do like triplets and all that, you can actually do that on the sequencer. I know the MPC One is great for that, for being able to, you just hold a note repeat. You can choose your repetition, like 30 seconds, triplets, and then just hold down the hats and all that. Like that's one of a great thing in the MPC One. I do like that. You can simulate that stuff in the Digitakt. It's a little bit more difficult though, and like I said, you have to go into a menu. So not as intuitive, but it's still there and it gives you the option. So another thing that I want to mention is that the functionality of the Digitakt is right in front of you. They're organized in a way that gives you the quickest access possible to the information that's being served to you from the Digitakt. So you can create really quickly. And I really appreciate that about the Digitakt. It's part of that Electron way, where as complex as this is with all the information that's in there, it's actually pretty straightforward what they give you in the options. Whereas the MPC One, in my opinion, it's pretty complicated because you do have quite a bit of knobs and dials and all that stuff, but in order to have the full access to everything that's happening in the MPC platform, the software, you have to be jumping through the menus. You have to be relying on being able to touch certain things on the screen. I know the majority of the stuff is technically available on the buttons, and that's one of the great things about the MPC One is there's more buttons. It's got the most buttons out of all of them, and they do all connect and relate that way. Sooner or later, you have to interact with the touchscreen. So, in my opinion, I don't personally like interacting with the touchscreen that often. I have to use the MPC screen to do certain things. Or at least it feels that way. It doesn't feel like I can basically fly blind. So in terms of design philosophies, I really feel like the Digitakt wins on that side because everything is there and it's relatively straightforward, and there's little like shortcuts and things that get you there quicker, which is super smooth. There is definitely shortcuts, and again, the platform is deeper on the MPC One, so you have to keep that in mind. But there is a lot of menu diving, just straight up. Like if you want to use any of the plugins, like it's menu dive city. But that's the trade-off that you get with so much flexibility. How do you put like 100 plugins into a device and not have a touchscreen involved? Like you have to at that point. And so the Digitakt, like if you were to put 100 effects plugins in the Digitakt, it would just be strange. It wouldn't fit. So that's part of the pros and cons. It's a pro and a con all at the same time. So yeah, there's definitely menu diving and navigation you have to do with the screen, but it's nowhere near as limited when it comes to sequencing and sound manipulation, all that, as the Digitakt is. In fact, I'm sure that some people who are barely researched the Digitakt and are just now finding out that you only have 4 bars for your patterns, that must be a little bit of a strange concept. I should mention that you do have access to all these patterns. So you have 8 banks of 16 patterns. So you do have quite a bit. So you can hit bank, and then you can say like, I want bank D. So I'm in bank D and I can hit pattern 1. So I have 16 patterns in bank D. Each pattern has a potential of 4 bars total. Now obviously each pattern has their own channels and all that. You can have different MIDI channels on each pattern. You can have different sounds in the pattern as well for the channels. But it does share a 128 sample pool for the project. You can load up a lot of projects. I don't know how many specifically, but you can load up a lot. And I believe it's limited to the amount of RAM or local disk space that's on there, which I think is like a gig or something. Again, not a lot, but when you're just doing mono samples, it's actually fine for what it's doing. Again, you're not throwing in like a 3-minute song and cutting it up in Digitakt. That's not its purpose. Its purpose is grabbing like these one-shots or like little snippets of stuff and sequencing it together. Like the sequencer really is the showstopper when it comes to the Digitakt. So yeah, 16 patterns per bank, 8 banks total. That gives you an idea of what's possible in each project. And again, you can make a ton of projects. You can actually string together patterns. So you can have like pattern 1, 2, and 3 play like sequentially, but you can't save that information in the Digitakt. So if you go to a show, turn on your Digitakt and want to recall that pattern chain that you saved, you can't do that. You have to re-trigger it every time, or you have to hold down the patterns in a particular style, like that, and then let's say it's going to play the chain. It will never save that information, and that might come in a future update, like a song mode update. I know a lot of people have requested that. So with all that functionality and being able to sequence MIDI devices or hardware devices and all that, obviously that's all in the MPC One, and it actually works out really well. I do like its setup for this. What I typically do is I'll have, when we're doing a jam, I'll have the track mute page open so I can trigger stuff on and off. And this is basically how I have it set up to be able to trigger stuff. So I'll be like, you know, bass, drums, some sort of keys, a pad, some weird lead sound, maybe some samples, Meems voice samples or something like that. It's a really convenient way of setting it up. And it's similar to what I do on the Digitakt. When we're jamming, I have the Digitakt in mute mode, and all these are technically, the channel is on or off. So these first 4 channels, they're off now. Now they're on. So same type of thing on here, I can do this. One little gripe though is when it comes to Digitakt, it's extremely responsive because there's no velocity on these pads. Forgot to mention that. There's no velocity in the pads, but you can always go in and adjust the velocity later. The pads in the MPC One are responsive, but sometimes don't really respond without being really somewhat aggressive. And I know you can adjust velocity curves in the hardware. Maybe I need to go in and do more of that. If you guys have any recommendations or maybe a video on the best way to adjust velocity curves for MPC products, I'd love to see it. So I don't know if you guys have something like that. But a little gripe is sometimes it'll miss on here, and the tack, like it doesn't, like I can be like this and sometimes it doesn't grab it. So I don't know if that's a software bug or it's just me being weird. But yeah, when it comes to MPC 2.8, that was recent that came out, this becomes very powerful for being able to just quickly throw all your gear together. You could have all your gear set up on like these 16 pads right here and be able to mute the stuff on and off. And with that flexibility comes the need to program all of it. So you have to go in, dig in, and be very selective about the software, and you have to menu dive. Like I said, there's things in here where you're definitely gonna have to dive through the menus, and you have to dot your I's and cross your T's because you will forget stuff and be like, why is that not working? And then you dig into the menu and you're like, oh, that's why that's not working, because it didn't set up properly. Whereas Digitakt is pretty straightforward right away. You plug in your MIDI stuff and you're good to go. Now another feature the MPC One has that I think is a real game changer is the CV outs. I think this is brilliant. You have 4 pairs of CV gate outs and all that, and you can sequence them directly in the MPC. And it's super, super simple. You just literally click CV, and you can choose the type for the notes, last note, highest note, lowest note. If you're playing a chord, you can choose the CV port 1 through 8, and then you can choose the gate port 1 through 8. You got CV and you got gate right there. You can even set up a modulation wheel out right there. So it'd be like modulation wheel number 3, and you can also set up velocity as well. We'll go out to gate 4. So there it is. You have pitch, gate, modulation, and velocity all set up, good to go on 4 ports right there. I think that is incredibly slick. If you have modular gear and you pick up an MPC One, it opens up quite a bit of possibilities for you. You might be thinking the Digitakt is getting left in the dust. And by itself, it is getting left in the dust. But if you buy an extra device for like $100, you can actually augment its capabilities. The CV.OCD. I have cables already plugged into it because it's kind of a pain. This is a pretty slick device. It powers up via 9 to 12 volt DC, and you can program it on a website to tell it how you want it set up, and you just go MIDI in. You can even have the eighth jack MIDI in right there. And what you get access to is a bunch of gates and CV information, modulation information. While you do have 8 ports with the MPC One, if you were to have a device like this, then technically you have 16? Yeah, you have 16 ports right there. So you have A, B, C, D for CV information, control voltage, and then you have a crap load of gates and other options on there. So if you do go with this, you technically have more options, and you could also even hook this up into the MPC One for more flexibility. Because what I have right here, these are technically drum triggers for my modular, and that's why I didn't unplug these, because it's kind of a pain to plug them all in and out. So when I do hook this up to the trigger, I just go in, I set it right next to the device, just jack in all the triggers right there, and then it's good to go. I've used this on a few jams. Can't remember how many specifically with the Digitakt, and it worked out super smooth. This is definitely a great solution if you are considering using the Digitakt with modular gear. Like, super smooth capability. You can have a clock out on this also, I forgot. One of these was a clock out. So clock out, then drum triggers, and then CV stuff and all that. I mean, obviously you're probably gonna use drums in the Digitakt, but it's nice to be able to trigger modular drums from time to time. And again, it runs about 100 to 150 bucks. So keep that in mind if you are thinking about that. So how about performance tools like filter sweeps and effects and all that type of stuff? The MPC One has a dedicated XY interface right here. And as you can see, it says insert XY program. You can hit insert, and then you can also set this up. So you can do like beat repeat on one axis, but you can change all this stuff too. So it'd be like phaser delay. Yeah, these are all technically presets. So you'll change the stuff on the y-axis. Usually the y-axis is going to be something like cutoff or resonance or feedback or something. It's very like DJ toolish if you're looking for something like that. So if you want to take the MPC platform, like the MPC One or Alive, to a club, and if you already have a full-on sequence or an arrangement set up, then you're going to be able to let it fly solo for a bit and mess with the XY feature on there. On contrast, the Digitakt does not have anything like that whatsoever. But it does have something that's different, which is cool. Digitakt is more of like a creative sound design type of thing. Pattern this one? Yeah. So let's go save pattern. If you hold the track button, you'll be able to manipulate all this stuff. So, and reload. So what is happening right there? This is like one of these shortcut things on Digitakt. When you hold the track button, it's saying that all 8 tracks are going to get affected by whatever you change while holding that button. First thought is you're going to destroy everything, right? Oh, something that I didn't mention, which is worth mentioning right now. The way this saves information is it's all real time. It's like directly saved to the hardware. So whenever you make a change on there, if you turn off the Electron gear and then load it back on, it's going to recall where it was, where the state that it was at, which is super handy and also super dangerous, because if you get used to that and you start doing that in other gear, you're going to lose a bunch of information. But in order to commit something, saying like, this is technically the pattern, and if I ever wanted to recall it, this is what it would be, you go function and then yes to save pattern. So it says save pattern now. So I can now reload that pattern at any given time by function and no, which just says reload pattern. That means it's going to pull from that memory and completely restore everything. Obviously you can save project as well, but again, it's technically saving in real time. So the only time it'll actually be overwritten or lost is when you write over it. So the trackability, super cool. Let's use the filter on here. So that gives you a taste. The MPC One cannot do that, just straight up. In fact, I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong about that, obviously let me know in the comments, but I don't think there's any functions in there to broadly change everything all at once like that. And I'll admit, it's not exactly the most useful global effect. If you're doing live performance type of stuff and it's more, like I said, a DJ set, clearly the MPC One XY feature is going to be what you want. That's just straightforward. It's bread and butter type of stuff. But if you want to make some really like creative type of leaps into places that are going to make you uncomfortable, then the Digitakt is right up your alley. If you want to get uncomfortable, Digitakt's where it's at. But in terms of a traditional filter sweep or cutoff or saturation type of thing, it doesn't technically have that for the Master Effects. It does have the compressor, and it is a good compressor, but you're not going to get some sort of tube distortion transformer push out of it or anything like that. So you do have to hook up something else like the analog heat. And in my opinion, Electron Analog Heat is a fantastic device, and both of these devices benefit dramatically from having it hooked up to the 2-bus. Because just having a device off to the side that you can control filter on, so you can automatically sweep off the top or throw some extra bite with distortion, is going to benefit both of these boxes. They're both going to love getting extra distortion or filter stuff from the Analog Heat. And it works with Overbridge too, and we'll get to Overbridge soon. I think the MPC One technically wins in terms of global performance type of stuff. That being said, if you are doing live arrangement type of things where you're messing with stuff and kind of performing your arrangement, then I don't think this XY tool is very useful because it takes up the screen. You have to switch to it every single time. So you'd have to like do shift like this to switch in and out. Now you can obviously latch this if you want. So it'll like stay right there and go do your things. It's just, I feel like there's quite a bit of juggle on there. So if you're in the track view for muting stuff, like if I want to mute these tracks, see it did it. It didn't actually mute that one. Why you do that, MPC? So if you, let's say you want to do that, like if you go into the XY, say it doesn't hold on to that. Maybe there's a setting in the software that tells it to always stick to whatever pad thing you're on. But I find that personally annoying because I'd really like to be able to do the XY effects right here and bring stuff in and out via the pads. And it doesn't appear that that's possible, which is it's a shame. I think it's time to talk PC integration with these boxes. So let's talk Digitakt first. Electron Overbridge software. It became a bit of a meme for a while there because it felt that it just wasn't going to come out. When these boxes came out, they originally advertised Overbridge as the solution where you're going to be able to connect it up to your PC and do magic with it, where all these things are going to become available and you're going to be like, whoa, how is that possible? And then a year or two went by and nothing. Well, it finally came out of beta, and so it's an official Overbridge 2.0 release that is stable. And I do know it's been stable for a while, and I know people have been using it technically. But recently, with the 2.0 that came out, I checked it out, and Overbridge is actually really freaking cool. Standalone audio interface version, that's cool and all. But when you look at it as the plugin of Overbridge and being able to load it up into something like Ableton Live, which is what I do, Overbridge opens up a huge amount of possibilities because as it is right now, you have a left and a right output on the Digitakt. And that is limiting, obviously. You have 8 channels on here. Sometimes you want access to, say, 2 channels, and they can be affected completely separately. And you want to get around this problem of only having these 2 send effects on here. Overbridge is your solution. Basically, it gets treated as a VST plugin in your DAW. So you go into Ableton, you load it up, and then you'll be able to see the plugin interface, and it controls, I believe, 99% of the features that are in the Digitakt. And this goes for the Digitone, the Analog Rhythm, and the Analog 4. I highly recommend you guys check it out if you do have these devices. So in Ableton, you'll be able to send each individual track to its own routing if you prefer, or you can just have the standard output come through the channel on Ableton. And the other really smooth thing is you just plug in one USB cable. So just boom, USB cable in there, plug it in your PC, and you're good to go. You do not have to configure any audio information for it to work properly inside Ableton when you already have an audio interface hooked up. I personally have a Motu 828 ES, and that's my main audio interface, and so that's what Ableton looks at. And when I use the VST plugin for the Digitakt or Digitone or anything like that, it just treats it as a VST plugin. So smooth. So I'm able to get all 8 channels out of there, and I can record them separately, I can affect them separately, and I can also route them out of the outputs of the Motu and then affect them separately via hardware. I can send them each to individual guitar pedals and then route them back into my board for additional processing and all that. What's nice is you can just plug in via one USB cable and you have all that information routed right there. You got the audio, you got MIDI, all that it's taken care of, and it's existing cohesively with other audio interfaces and not having to jump through some weird hoops. Another thing as well that's really nice is the clocking ability with Overbridge enabled is super solid. So if you go into Ableton and turn off the clock in the MIDI interface in the Ableton MIDI panel, turn off clocking for Digitakt on there, make sure clock and transport is on in the Overbridge plugin, and then it's a solid BPM, like it does not waver. Another super smooth feature of Overbridge when you're in the plugin interface is you can actually go into the factory sounds on here and you can actually browse them like a normal VST plugin and just audition stuff. You can drag and drop it into these channels on here. The only caveat that I've found so far is it does introduce 50 or so milliseconds of delay into the audio engine. So it's not light on the engine when you load up into a Overbridge plugin. So you do have to work around that somewhat, but it's just a really smooth workflow if you do have Overbridge set up and you use something like Ableton. I find it extremely fun. It also fixes a lot of my problems with Digitakt when it comes to effects, being able to process things separately, and what if I want to record individual tracks by themselves and all that. Like it basically solves all that. The caveat is that I have to have it hooked up to a PC. But I could also do all the work on the Digitakt somewhere else and then bring that to a PC and break out all the stuff easily and not have to worry about, all right, I need to mute this and now hit record and I mute that, hit record. I can literally just load up all 8 tracks how I want and then hit record and then we're done. And when they're recording, I can mess with stuff and do some weird like sound design and shaping. So again, like smooth, super smooth. And it works also on the other products, the Digitone, the Analog Heat, the Analog Rhythm, and the Analog 4. So in my opinion, Overbridge, top notch, really like the integration. Now let's talk MPC software. Unfortunately, I did not have as smooth of an experience with the MPC software. In fact, I wasn't even sure if I owned the MPC software. For a while there, I thought I had to spend an extra $200 to get the MPC software because I couldn't really find anywhere on the webpage that said if you own an MPC One, you own the software. So I was like, huh? So I ended up downloading the trial first, initially. To clarify, yes, you do own the MPC software if you register your MPC One. What you have to do is you go into your panel, you register it, and then you scroll all the way down. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, and the product or your registered products, and you'll see MPC 2.8, I believe. I mean, I'm confusing myself as I talk about it. Yeah, you scroll down, you see MPC 2.8, and then it says Get Serial. So you're like, Get Serial. So that's how you get a copy of MPC software if you own the device. It's so convoluted. I thought I had to spend $200 on it. I legit thought, I was like, damn, I bought the hardware. So before I realized I actually owned it, I did do the trial. So I downloaded it, loaded it up, and then iLock. iLock is a security encryption type of key tool that I personally don't like. Like, I find it super annoying anytime a software company wants you to jump through hoops to license their software. When like pirates, if they really want to pirate something, they're gonna crack it anyways. So it's like, you're making me, a consumer, a paying customer, have to jump through hoops to go through that stuff. So I personally don't like iLock because I've had problems in the past. I can look past it, but just want to let you guys know. Moving on from that, load up the software. Then I go into the MPC, and in order to do that, I think you go menu and you click on MPC right here, and it'll say, oops, yeah, don't save. It'll say looking for a computer so it can become a controller. And that works super smooth. So on the MPC software, it loads up and it looks very familiar to what you get on this setup right here. And a lot of the controls and functions are laid out in like a Windows style, and it seems very straightforward. So yeah, that's cool, it works. Like, this basically becomes a glorified controller for the MPC software. And keep in mind, this is all up to date as well. I'm on 2.8, I tried this on 2.8. So once all that's working, I'm thinking, okay, let's load up a jam that I did and see it load up on the computer, because what I'd like is to be able to send out those tracks into multiple outputs or separate stems like I would with the Digitakt with Overbridge, because that's, in my opinion, one of the big powers of it. In fact, my biggest gripe right now with the MPC One is not being able to have multiple outs. If I could hook up a separate audio interface, great. If it came with additional outputs, that'd be awesome too. And I know with the Live or the Live 2, those have 4 additional outs, but it's also nearly twice the amount of money. So it's like an extra $500 or so, $600 if I went towards a Live 2. So that's kind of defeating the purpose of some of this. So I digress though. What I want to do is load up the software and then be able to utilize multiple outs from that, right? Like, that's the logical goal. So jump to the software and I go into browse and I notice it's only showing me my PC hard drives. I'm like, okay, well, where's the MPC One stuff? So I'm searching and none of it is showing up. The internal hard drive for the MPC One is not showing up on the PC, nor the SD card is showing up, which I find super strange. Like, you're not gonna reveal the SD card when I plug it in via USB? Like, what? Is this an oversight? Is it a bug? I don't get it. So I Google it, and it seems other people are having the exact same issue, and I couldn't get a clear understanding if this was how it's intended, to where you have to basically plug in a separate hard drive via the USB and then jockey the data back and forth, or hook up the SD card into an SD card reader. So that involves me unplugging that, hooking up an SD reader if I don't have one already, and putting it into the computer that way. Like, if those are the hoops that I have to go through in order to transfer a project, then I'm already demotivated from this process. Because in my opinion, the cool thing is being able to take a project to and from easily, right? Like, if you want to start on the MPC One, then you want to test some stuff on the PC, or maybe grab a couple things and then bring it back to the MPC One. That would be a great workflow, right? Well, it does not seem easy at all unless you have a few extra peripherals set up right there. The overbridge, everything connects and accesses the data on the Digitakt immediately. Like, it's all on there, all the patterns. You're not having some weird, like, now it's on a PC type of thing. Digitakt is controlling the overbridge software and it's emulating the Digitakt or something like that. No, it is all still existing on the Digitakt, and the overbridge is making a communication channel or port or whatever that allows you to see what's happening on the hardware. I was really hoping the MPC One was going to be that way, or the Live or MPCX or whatever. It does not appear that way. It seems that the MPC software exists on the PC, and that does allow you to use the VSTs and all that, but it kind of defeats the purpose for me, because if I'm going to load up a PC, I'm going Ableton Live, just straight up. Like, it's going to be an Ableton Live. And I know that the MPC software can exist as a plugin inside of Ableton Live. If I have to transfer the project to my PC every time I want to use it inside Ableton Live, if I'm doing some stuff, and I bring it over to a studio, like a new studio I'm working in or something like that, and then I have to transfer that data to that PC, that's already a pain in the ass. Like, I know it seems kind of silly to be like, oh, you're making me jump through these hoops right now. And because, like, all this technology is offering so much incredible potential already. But when I know that these other devices transfer data via USB, or just the sheer fact of revealing the storage devices on the PC by plugging in the USB connector, like, that alone makes me go, huh? Really? Like, why couldn't you just expose that so I can then easily access those things on these devices? So that's, in my opinion, it's a big strike. It's a big inconvenience, because when you're in the middle of a creative spark, anytime you have to suddenly go get a hard drive or some sort of adapter and get in the back of your PC and plug that in or whatever, anytime that's happening, that's creating road bumps, in my opinion, to getting the job done. Again, it would have been so cool if you could just plug this in and it technically acts as all the information is on the MPC One and you have access to it directly in the MPC software, and then load it up as a plugin on Ableton Live. That would have been super smooth, but unfortunately, that's not it. It's nice to have the option in case you do make an extremely complex project on here and you need to transfer it to break it out into individual stuff. So you do have the option, at least. So out of these two, if you were looking at it from a software standpoint, I think Overbridge knocks it out of the park and is incredibly intuitive and interesting addition to whatever you already have going on the PC. If you don't have a DAW, then you do get MPC software, and I haven't done a lot of work with it. I know some people really do like that software, so you do technically get a DAW in addition to a piece of hardware that can act as a controller. And if you are looking for that, then that's technically a $700 solution. And when you compare other things, like Ableton isn't exactly cheap, and if you were to get the Ableton Push, the Push 2, I mean, that's a pretty expensive controller. So I think Ableton Live is a better DAW personally, and I'd rather produce music in Ableton Live. But if you're new and need a DAW and want to use something like the MPC Live or the MPC One with MPC software, then that totally works. So that is technically a good solution if you're starting up. And on top of that, you do get an audio interface as well. If you were to get Ableton Push 2, you would not have an audio interface with that. You'd have to buy that separately. So as an all-in-one solution with the software, the audio interface, all that, it's actually pretty attractive. But the data back and forth falls pretty flat. So I guess you can't have everything, right? Also, if you consider either of these devices for the audio interface aspect, do keep in mind that you still need a preamp or a DI to be able to get instruments into them, because they're line level inputs on there. They're not microphone level inputs, or they're not instrument level inputs. You have to have something to convert the signal into the proper line level signal for these devices to communicate with that. Personally, I have a Mackie mixer off to my side that routes all my audio and stuff, so you can use something like that, but there's lots of options out there. But you do need to keep that in mind if you're thinking about this strictly as an audio interface with the additional features and all that. So yeah, final thoughts on PC integration. Overbridge, super smooth. If you already have Ableton Live or something like that, then I think it's the perfect integration option. If you don't have a DAW, I mean, MPC One is a full-fledged DAW, or the MPC software in general. So that brings us to the what do you need from the box question. Are you looking for a complete DAW to create, produce, arrange, and finish your projects? The MPC software and platform will get you pretty much 95% of the way there. Actually, 100% technically. The Digitakt is not a DAW. It's great for sketching ideas. It's great for doing arrangements. It's great for being the hub of your studio if you have a lot of gear already that needs sequencing. In fact, it's pretty much my go-to sequencer if I'm not planning on doing any additional sampling. Like if Memes wants to do harmony vocals on something that's going to be technically a jam, the MPC One is great for that. Like just straight up, you can do 8 bars, 12 bars, 16 bars, or just 4 bars, whatever. It's not controlled or limited. MPC One wins on that side. If I'm just looking to sequence stuff really quick or get going super fast, Digitakt wins right there. If you want a hands-on beat creation tool that you'll eventually bring into Ableton Live or Pro Tools, either one is going to be fantastic at this. The MPC One will have the most flexibility, but the Digitakt will spark the most creativity. Personally, I make beats differently on each device. It's just the workflow helps facilitate certain creative experiences and motives, and that's really what I like about these two devices. The Electron sequencer is just going to make different ideas than the MPC sequencer. And the MPC sequencer, I didn't show that in here, but like it has its way about it. I personally don't think it's as comfortable as the Digitakt. That might just be the fact that I haven't worked with it enough, but it's not the first thing that I reach for if I'm thinking like simple sequencing or quick and easy sequencing. Usually I like to record stuff in it, and then if I need to adjust some stuff in here, I can. Again, it's just you have so much touch screen interaction that happens with the MPC One that you're either gonna like that or not. The MPC screen, I find myself kind of like fiddling a lot. That being said, it definitely gets the job done. Building beats with the Digitakt and then bringing it in with Overbridge in Ableton Live is really awesome. So that, if you're doing beats strictly and then finishing stuff in Ableton Live, man, the Digitakt really does a great job of that. Are you looking strictly for a sampler between these two? The MPC One is going to win right here. I mean, the sampling capabilities and the fact that it's stereo, you can save it to an SD card, you can have tons of sample information, you can have just an insane amount loaded up in any given time. It's going to win. But on the flip side, the Digitakt is super quick on it. So you can just go into sampling mode and you're automatically off to the races to being able to cut up stuff and save it directly to these voices. It's going to be more of a simpler version of the stuff, but simple isn't bad, and sometimes simple can be technically more creative. Are you looking for a portable beat-making device? Now, neither of these have a built-in battery. I know the MPC Live 1 and 2 have built-in batteries, but they're also a lot more expensive. So both of these definitely have to be powered up. The Digitakt is 2/3 of the size of the MPC One, so technically it's the most portable and can fit in a backpack relatively easy. I think they're both about the same weight. I could totally look on the website for this, but I'm gonna do it this way. Yeah, they feel pretty similar. The Digitakt feels like metal, and the MPC One has more plastic, I think. But in terms of actual portability, like, if that's really what you're looking for, I think something like an OPZ would be better, technically. I mean, you could sample with it, you can sequence stuff, you are limited on the sounds that you have, but that's like insanely portable. It's like a little remote control type of thing. Yeah, I'd say between these two, the most backpack friendly is gonna be the Digitakt. And honestly, I think if I was sitting on like a train or something like that, I think I'd prefer to have the Digitakt. Anyways, like the workflow just screams, this is how you do it, get to the point quickly. Whereas I would be deep diving into menus on the MPC One in a setting like that. That's how I feel about that. And speaking of menu diving, both of these technically have menu diving scenarios that happen, and especially if you go into like the actual settings of the Digitakt and all that, like there's some things that definitely require some menu diving. But that being said, the MPC One is the most. Like, you're gonna be menu diving for normal things most of the time. Like anytime you're doing effects, or if you're going to be doing any kind of editing on stuff, you're going to be jumping through menus, and you're going to be going through dialogues and saving stuff and going on here, typing for naming stuff and all that. So I think in terms of layout and user friendliness, I do think the Digitakt, once you learn the Digitakt, is the most user friendly and quick. And that's why I said like that train comparison, if you are out in public on a train or something like that, I think that would be the most comfortable personally, if you did have a power source. So at the end of the day, I think of the Digitakt as an instrument, sequencer, beatbox sampler, all in kind of that order. It definitely feels like an instrument. You know, it has a certain feel and thing that it emotes out of it. The MPC One can do all those things, and it really excels at all that stuff too. So when picking one of these devices, which one is the correct choice? I think the correct choice is both. Imagine creating a beat in the Digitakt with all the performance trigs. You know, you're creating generative measures and stuff is like changing every 8 bars and all that stuff, and then you sample that directly into the MPC One, you chop it up, you morph it, you twist it, you make a beat out of that, and then you send some of that information back in the Digitakt. You start pitch shifting, bit crushing and all that, and then doing more sequencing, and you start making a larger beat out of that. In terms of raw inspiration, the Digitakt is going to spark creativity right away. And in terms of being able to organize ideas and put them down in a way that makes sense, the MPC One is going to excel at that. So when you have both of those options going back and forth, it's actually a really great setup. I mean, you can make some really cool sounds out of this and then sample it directly into the instrument sampler and then be able to play that polyphonically in the MPC One. And you can control it all via the USB MIDIs type of stuff that's hooked up in there. So on that note, I apologize if I just gave you more gear acquisition syndrome. My apologies. And that's it for this video, guys. I really hope that I gave you some useful information that can help you decide if you have been on the fence of either one. At the end of the day, if you're into music gear, eventually you're probably going to have both at some point. And I know some people like the Digitakt and they don't, and same thing with the MPC platform and all that. If you have thoughts on this stuff, I'd love to hear it in the comments, so leave a comment. Memes and I always read all the comments as well, so if you do have any thoughts on our stuff, we're always open for discussions, and we love talking about music. If you like the video, make sure to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to hit the sub button, ring the bell, all that stuff. We got more content coming, more jams, and more gear discussions and all that. Really enjoying making this style of content for you guys. If you want to go even further on supporting the channel, you can always check out our music on Bandcamp and stream our records on Spotify. And follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all those places. We'll see you next time for another video. Deuces.
We got each other, we got each other, we got each other.